So hello everyone, I'm Moshe Malawar or Jonathan Schemoul, however you prefer to call me. My real name is Jonathan. I'm the founder of aleph.im. We are doing a decentralized cloud computing platform, meaning that you can even decentralize the back end of your game. Like if you are using AWS, you could use aleph.im instead. So that's what we are doing, and also infrastructure for like storing NFT metadata and stuff like that in a decentralized way.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lucas. I'm dealing with the commercial strategy of Nsuite. So what Nsuite is a private key management solution. We'll be talking a little bit more about that in a minute. Of DoubleJump.Tokyo, we are a big blockchain gaming player in Japan. We work with a lot of big IP holders. We operate mainly in the Oasis blockchain. But today we're going to focus the conversation in decentralization and how private keys and self-custody can enable that. Very nice to meet you all.
Hello. Yeah. Hi, everyone. So I'm Anthony. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Liteflow. We are actually building a suite of tools for games and NFT projects to mint, create collection, and even go to have like their own exchange, their own marketplace, and things like that. And so we have a lot of actually like gaming projects to actually integrate all the NFT as part of their products and make sure that they can decentralize their game. And I think that's the part we discussed today a bit, really how they can actually decentralize this part, why they need to decentralize this part, and what would be the step for that. So I would say maybe the first question here is like, what do you think of the state right now of the game, what they need to do to build a game currently like a Web2 traditional game, and what are the pieces to actually decentralize on that?
So I will start really on the infrastructure part. So like on the Web2 side, you need to like have game servers, deploy your game somewhere, have people getting your game from somewhere, like on the distribution side of things. And then once you like have your game, you need to play with it. So like you are talking with servers, and then decentralizing those servers is a natural step. Then there is all the ownership part of it. Like why is Web3 really interesting for? It's because you could really own some parts of your game, and that's where NFT part comes, and that's where like all the ownership solutions come. You should also being able to like decentralize those assets, because if you want to be able to like move an asset from one game to like another, from like another publisher, if it's stored in a decentralized way, you can do it. So that's on my end. Then I will pass to like my co-panelist.
Yeah, I can go ahead and that maybe can introduce herself and start. But I think from our end, like completely agree with Jonathan. But if you look at Web2 gaming or traditional gaming, and the difference between that and Web3 is really the key word, as we all know, is ownership. So enabling teams to build their digital assets, and like the way we look at it is not only through the lens of the users, that is a natural part of it, but also the people who are building the games, so the developers and operating as a team. Overall, that requires also a good level of ownership and understanding how you're operating those assets, and that comes with like some challenges that are specific to the technology. So how to handle the private keys when you needed to deploy smart contracts, when you needed to distribute mint NFTs, distribute mint tokens, interactive decentralized applications. So all that is also part of the difference of building something in Web2 and then shifting to Web3. So not only looking at the gamers and how they're going to, as of now, start to own their assets, but also to the companies, because all of a sudden they have a treasury of digital assets that used to be just maybe some in-game content that would sit in a server and just be distributed as a way to monetize. But now they are actual assets that are traded between peer-to-peer between gamers, and you have to understand how to manage that effectively.
Would you mind repeating what was the frame of the question? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, so that was to kind of like know a bit the state of the games right now, what they are actually doing right now currently, all the Web2 games, and what they need to do basically to go into these Web3 games, decentralized games, and to actually introduce this infrastructure part.
So on the way here, we were just talking with my co-founder about like this, exactly the question that you said, the difference between the like the world in which Web2 gaming and Web3 gaming is operating. And from what I've heard, that so Daria from Vert here, Vert is a payment gateway for Web3 gaming and other Web3 projects. So we were thinking that what you guys just mentioned about the inside infrastructure, like what you do with the in-game assets, maybe tokens and etc. This is very important part, but also all the games exist in the bigger infrastructure, which is like what device you're using, App Store, Google Store, all these things. And so I've tried to compare what's going on in Web3 gaming and Web2, like for example, download Web2 games and see what they are doing. But the interesting thing is it looks to me as nothing is happening besides just App Store and all these big companies just trying to get as much money as possible. Like for example, they try as to selling NFT as an in-game item is quite difficult because they want to charge 30% fee or 15% fee. And this is like, how can Web3 games compete if these things are happening? And I think we'll talk about that later, that we are trying to solve that for Web3 gaming. But I believe that in the future, if such alliances as this one are coming together to solve this, like maybe imagine some other store or like, I don't know, maybe some new device will exist for this thing. So this will really help this to thrive. Yeah.
I think it's good because there is definitely like to have like a blockchain game or like just like a Web3 game. There's a lot of tools that you need, like all the stores are one. You were talking about the custody part as well, that is really important, and that's launching a collection is something, let's say, quite easy. But launching like maybe 10 of different collections to have your lands, your avatar, your different assets in game, plus on top of that, managing the security for that, auditing all your contract, everything, managing all the key for that, making sure that everything is safe. That's something that is quite tricky to do, let's be honest. And so that's something I would love to have your take on that, like with the project you actually work with, on like, is it really a pain point for this project? Do they even think about that? Because I think a lot of projects for now, especially in the Web3 gaming, they are like, we will launch a collection, we don't necessarily work on our game yet, so we don't have this type of problems yet. But that's the part I want to see here. If you, like with the different projects you work with, are they actually concerned about that? They should, let's be honest, but are they concerned about that yet? Or is it something that they still don't think and that we need to basically onboard them and educate them on that to make sure that they can actually build the right games?
So I think I can start with that. Normally, when we look at our current customer base, we can divide very clearly between the native Web3 teams and kind of the adopters, which are bigger companies which are in the gaming space already for traditional gaming and are now doing projects in the Web3 space. So here, that kind of the timing of concern is a little bit different. So when we talk to the smaller teams, like a lot of teams are independent in the beginning or just keep independent, but they start very like small. So not necessarily they will have to start to understand what are the problems they will be facing with the handling of these private keys or the self-custody itself. So anecdotally, sometimes we'll be talking to this like gaming teams or the founder or the head of development in a 3-people team, but they'll effectively be using the founder's wallet or something like very, if you think about a company that will be generating revenue, will be launching these collections and then launch the games, and as you mentioned, a lot of different assets that can come into the game, avatars, lands, all different sorts of NFTs, and if they decide to establish like a tokenomics or issue their own tokens in game, then you have that extra layer of concern that like there's a little bit more of treasury. So to come back to my point, the smaller teams, it takes them a little bit of time to realize how difficult this can be. We, as Double Jump Tokyo, we started small as any other company, but as we started to scale and our main game started to become very successful in Japan back in 2018, then we started to have many more people operating, all the things that are needed inside the team, the deployment of digital of smart contracts, the campaigns for distribution of NFTs and all, and controlling who has access to these private keys, because all of that requires a signature, becomes a transaction in the end of the day. So you start to lose control very quickly if you don't understand and acknowledge this challenge from an early point. Then just to finalize, the other profile of companies we work with, they come to us kind of inverse mindset. They understand very well about already working as a bigger corporation or a bigger team. They are very concerned about, first, what are the risks in entering the space, but second, how to manage those digital assets. They are used to workflows, they're used to steps of approval, so for them it's a little bit more kind of easy to understand why that is important, but still we have to walk them through all the differences of what effectively signing a transaction would mean, where these assets would sit, sometimes what even self-custody means. So I think the timing will depend on the type of company and the phase of it as well.
Well, on the handling of private key, if that's really the question,
yeah, the question was really like, do you think project right now, because some don't necessarily have like the the bigger picture of what they want to do, what they will do. They launch a collection, and 2 months later they launch another collection, and it can end up in like a kind of like a big mess where like, oh, this is this founder who actually has everything here, and then oh, actually this one here. And do you see this as actually an issue for projects? That's when they start to really build their product, they end up with a lot of difficulties with that on the wallet part, but also like with you with aleph, like basically all the kind of like function they are doing. I think there is some signature parts as well.
Well, to be fully honest, when companies come from the Web 2 space, they have a lot of cybersecurity issues as well. Like when you are doing online games, you need to be taking cryptography seriously. You need to handle SSH keys to like servers, Git commit rules, etc. Rules for like pull requests. So there are security people who are like already well versed into security, and private key, public key is just one kind of cryptography. And if they really know how to handle cryptography in general for the Web 2 game, in general it works. The main issue is with like smaller studios that don't necessarily have that experience, but they would have the same issue in the Web 2 world. And actually it happened that like Web 2 gaming studio got hacked or whatever. It like happens. And then you can find the source code of games leaked everywhere, etc. When you have actually digital assets, it's a bit more problematic, and there is a lot of ways to like make that better with like multi-party signatures, private computing, even in a decentralized way. Because if your private key is held by a non-modifiable private virtual machine, it can also help. Like there is a lot of ways that we can help them. Every wallet company can like help them as well. I think that's pretty much a non-issue for people who already know how to develop and how to handle cryptography, to be honest.
I think you asked about at what stage are they thinking about it? Something like that, right? So maybe they're thinking it's too late, and it's too late to change something, right? And I see this issue also can happen from the lack of bigger like system in the minds of developers, because they have like, okay, we have our game, we have some items, we want it to be decentralized, and it is not connected. It is not like some blueprint that is known to many, and maybe you can look at other games and you can look at something that happens in the market, or maybe you can use someone else's experience. So this is like kind of very chaotic for many, and that's why someone knows what they're doing and some are like doing baby steps, and that's why maybe they want to think about it from the beginning, but they cannot do that because there is no like list, you know, of things, to-do list, checklist that you need to take care of, and maybe also such events can help people to understand, oh, I forgot to key management or this management, that management. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is actually a good point, like the whole like framework on how to launch like a project correctly, because you can do a lot of mistakes in Web3 that are really costly for you and for your users, which is not something you want to do. And then kind of like framework in place where like, yeah, you need to think about your key management system, you need to think about the processing parts, because all the game we need to have some processing, you need to think about the onboarding part as well. So it's good to have like all this this type of like tools, this kind of like checklist that project can do. And so here we talk about the security part, but we have also like the whole processing part. Every games need to have some processing at some point. All the time is like they have their own server, they run their own server, and basically they process everything on this server that they own. I know, Jonathan, you work on some project to actually have all this computation decentralized. Can you talk a bit more about that? What really is the goal of this, and how does that actually help this type of games?
Yeah. So like the question is on having the whole backend decentralized, right?
Yes, with this kind of infrastructure for the processing part, because there is a kind of like the storage of data, which here we all agree that basically all the NFTs with all your assets and everything, but you still need some processing at some point to do whatever action, counting some points or this kind of thing like that in the game.
Yeah. Basically, in general, when you have most of the Web3 games still have centralized servers. Like when you go, even if it's a simple game, you will have a server that will say, okay, that guy won or that guy won. Sometimes they might use VRF on chain to do that, but there will still be calculation, indexing, etc., that will be centralized. It all boils down like if you can have your code that could run on like any kind of computer and have the same result, which is which can be predicted, then you can put it on a decentralized network. And if that decentralized network, like our network at aleph.im, just runs Linux virtual machine, you can like write your code in any language. Like it could be in Python, in C, in C++, Go, whatever. And then your game can just interact with your backend, get the calculation done, and get them, and it works. Sometimes you also want to like have random values there, and that's why we have an off-chain VRF that like allows you to get a VRF inside those decentralized virtual machine. For us, our end goal there is really that even really resource-intensive gaming backends, like let's say if you have an FPS, you need to like have gaming servers, or like if you have an MMORPG, the goal is to have that backend inside the decentralized network. And actually, power is sufficient, it works. What we are adding right now is confidential computing so that this backend can hold private keys that will never be leaked, even if the node owner is malicious. So that's the really tricky part there. And we are getting to it, and it's starting to work. And once you have that, you can decentralize the whole stack. Storage is on IPFS or like any other decentralized network. You can even have dynamic metadata. Let's say you have an action on game that, for example, you can have a sword. It gets broken inside a fight. The game engine tells the network, okay, that sword is broken. And now, whenever a user requests the metadata of the NFT of the sword, it will show a broken sword because this NFT metadata is generated on the fly by a decentralized network. You could do that with a centralized network. The main issue is that you could not prove why that sword is broken. And the game company could just broke your sword. You would have no way to verify on why it happened. And you would have no traceability over it. And then there is no point in having like an NFT if you do that.
And in terms of processing, I know, Daya, you work at Swert, which is basically like a payment system. So it's like delegating all the processing to help user actually buy some items in game and things like that. what's your take on the decentralization of processing?
So decentralization of processing, that sounds so so vague. So I would say about practical matters that happen when we work with games. The what everyone dreams about is like some crazy tokenomics and addictive game, and that it's just works like gem, and I don't know, it maybe tokens are sold on some other exchanges, and it's like something like paradise for gamers. I think looks like game developers look something like that. But what happens then is they understand that either they need to accept payments and they try to find some very simple way, and it turns out that the whole tokenomics, the whole infrastructure that they had in mind is not possible with the payment solution that existed in Web2 gaming. So what are we working on is that you can keep your token, you can price your NFT in your token, you can also send sell the cryptocurrency, the base that you use, for example, and you can do it all in a decentralized manner with our widget without compromising this big picture that they had in mind. Because a lot of times it happens that they say, oh, if we want to make our own token, we have to list it on some other exchange, and we have to ask our users to go there or somehow, I don't know. So this is like the very long funnel, and it's hard to compete with Web2 gaming. And for example, this thing that you've mentioned, this sounds like really cool development and really like smart, tricky things that you are doing, but it's not visible to the end user, sadly, because it's like really sounds really cool. And the same with payments. What user knows is that if I can use my card, for example, can I use GCB? Oh no, I should use only MasterCard. This is a bummer. Maybe they will not use this crazy cool game that is so well thought, and etc. etc. So yeah, what we are doing is we try to also do all the nitty-gritty that you can keep it in a decentralized way and never sacrifice this like system, the tokenomics that you had in mind, how it should be. So we try to make it possible that it should be like the developer imagined, and not like you have to do because the modules that you use, because interoperability is what you guys do, like the modules that you use are not giving you this freedom that you need. So this is very important thing in payment processing for decentralized projects.
And I think something you say here that is interesting is like the user will not see that. And I think that's the whole goal of like games in Web3 is like we need to stop believing that user will have their wallet and they will know everything about crypto and all this kind of thing like that. I think that's the point here with like the decentralization of the processing, the part of like managing the whole payments, managing the whole private keys and things like that. It basically gives the tools for the businesses, the game studio to actually build the game, to really think about the user experience and to really think also after about their economics. And so that's something that at some point I want to touch on is like the moment you start to kind of like decentralize the whole infrastructure for games, it can also be something really interesting for the tokenomics of the games as well, where you could merge the whole payment, I would say the whole supporting the infrastructure as part of the game, as the activity of the game. What did you see in terms of like games? Like I know it's still a bit early for now, but let's imagine that all the games, they are all like fully decentralized with decentralized processing, with like everything done correctly. And now they can actually incentivize their user to actually pay within the game to actually support this type of processing. Have you, I don't know, talked with some project that actually doing this kind of direction here, or is it still like really early on that to integrate really the tokenomics of the game on the big picture, not only in the game but on the outer game as well?
Outer game?
Like around the game, basically, not only just like the economic inside
I would
the
say,
game.
yeah, we work with some game. I don't remember the names. We work with some projects from the Alliance, and I would say that the most like thriving projects with tokenomics that are using Vert are those that first focus on themselves. They're like so obsessed with how their projects should be that they don't think too much about, I don't know, how others are doing, what is possible or not possible. And we talk a lot about what they need. And some of the most interesting features that we did in terms of decentralization were the result of our talks with the projects that came to Vert and asked about, oh, you know, we are doing this and this, like, is it possible like that? And we're like, huh, yeah, we should do that. And this is, that's why we have some features for gaming. Even pricing in native token is a very rare thing, actually. Or listing your, having your token sold on Vert without listing it on some other exchange is also something that we offer. So this is the result of the interaction, like of our talks between the game builders and us. And this is also interesting for us because we want to always be one step ahead of the industry. And this is only possible if you listen to what the projects are really dreaming of making, and not just, oh, we just offer that and that's it, either take it or go somewhere else. It's not the way we do things.
Lucas, any other take on that? The whole economy in games with all the different projects you worked with?
Yeah, like for us, for us with Nsuite, like we really stop in the 2B. We try to focus our attention in providing the needed support for the different custom solutions that the teams will need to do their operations. So now teams are doing kind of whenever they need to use private keys, and actually I completely agree with Jonathan in terms of private keys. Nothing new, is cryptography in the end of the day. However, I think the main difference when you bring it to inside the team that is operating the game, that is using blockchain technology, is that you have people who normally wouldn't have knowledge about this type of technology and needing to use it one way or the other, either directly or indirectly. So if you need to develop a campaign and distribute digital assets, and you'll be signing a transaction, in the end of the day, this transaction you're signing, if you're doing it yourself, that means you have like a big responsibility towards the assets of your company or that specific address that has been used for that operation. But to your specific point on the question, I think decentralization in gaming is not like black and white. Decentralization itself is part of a process, and also there's a spectrum. For example, abstraction sometimes happens through custodial solutions. That means you're giving the option for the gamer to own their assets, but in order to increase adoption, you're kind of removing that acknowledgement from them so that they can play, and whenever they want to own the assets, they can opt in. And while you're doing that, you're still centralizing all the ownership of these assets, like inside the developer. So there are a lot of things to be thought about. So gaming is not only about centralized or not centralized. It's about, first of all, gameplay and making sure the users are having a good time, building the right tokenomics as well, not to attract the bad behavior, as we've seen in like many previous cases in the gaming industry. And I think if those things can be balanced, and understanding how to provide that centralization on an end user level, keeping like the experience like fun, and that's what matters in the end of the day.
Yeah, no, definitely focus on your game. But yeah, it's good to know that there is a tools if you want to decentralize your game. I think that's the ultimate goal. We're still far from that, but at least, yeah, knowing that there is a tools around, it's actually a good thing. But yeah, definitely need to focus on the game. And I think we run out of time. Maybe like a really quick final thoughts. Yeah.
So one question from the crowd. Thanks for all of your questions. We actually have 3, but for the sake of time, I need to choose one. For every one of you, like you decide you would like to take this one, or even yourself as well, Anthony, we're focusing on content creation, but where does content creation sit with the future of decentralized infrastructure? I don't know if you have any take on that.
I think on my end, there is something that, especially in the gaming industry, that I'm really looking forward. It's like all these companies that are doing some games, and most of the games now, you have like this massive community of modder. And that's the like user-generated content, basically, where like people are creating some part of your games that are like either accepted or not by the game studio, which I think here there is a lot of things to do with that, where like game studio that would actually like really push their community to actually create some mods and also create an economy around that, because then they could have their own like official marketplace of mod that you can actually like buy the mod, and that would be actually the creator, the studio behind or whatever, that we take some fees from that. I think there is a big part in terms of like creator economy on that, to create some asset in game, to publish it in whatever marketplace of the game, that it could be integrated directly in the game. And that's something that's I haven't seen much, but I'm really kind of like bullish on this part. I think there is definitely like a really good direction for the games.
I can add a bit of. Oh, I'm sorry. So yeah, as we remember, the NFT boom started with just idea of ownership of something, and there were many quite small projects that started like with ownership of bits of text, ownership of bits of like anything can be owned as an NFT, and and sounded for many people like, oh, this is crazy, we don't need too much of that. And next we have, for example, AI, which can use anything in their process and then kind of create anything else. And I think also with the user-generated content, right? The same. So we are kind of ready to offer users and players to contribute, because we have something already, the infrastructure in place. And this is like the next step, and maybe the next step will be even more exciting. So yeah, I think that more people will take part in the creation.
Yeah, very quickly for me, like the key is interoperability between games and chains. So that has a big potential to provide, opportunity for content creators, independent even content creators. If like these digital assets that are being created, say in-game assets, can be utilized in different games, even within the same ecosystem or with different chains, all of a sudden you bring even more utility to these assets and a bigger audience to be trading them on a utility level, not necessarily like thinking about how it can be valued. So that's one of the things that we try to bring to reality in our layer 2 in Oasis. And the sole purpose of Oasis as well is to think about how you can go back to the hub layer and then transit to a different universe or layer 2 to play a different game. So in my opinion, I'm very excited about that part.
Very quickly as well, as Anthony was saying, like user-generated content is really interesting because we can have new things created by like modders, etc. But if you take into account that like many times game studios say, okay, that game we like sold it a while ago. We don't want to like support it anymore. If the backend is fully decentralized, users can like come together as a DAO and pay for the servers for like the game to continue to run. And what if those players were putting together to like develop sequel to like the games, continuing like fully development of the game to add new levels, new content, etc. And then the game would just become part of a DAO and become part of the community itself. And then no more hard feelings toward a studio that would abandon a game, which is quite big as well, I think.